You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Trust within a team is not an abstract concept, but a lived expectation of reliability, competence, honesty, and care. It forms the invisible infrastructure that allows agile teams to collaborate effectively under pressure. Transparency is the mechanism that makes trust visible. When people share status, risks, and reasoning openly, their reliability and intentions become observable rather than assumed. Without transparency, trust quickly erodes, replaced by speculation, politics, and second-guessing. With transparency, trust strengthens, because individuals see evidence that their colleagues are dependable and honest in real time. In this sense, transparency is not about radical openness in every domain, but about appropriate, timely candor in work-related matters. When paired with boundaries of confidentiality and respect, it builds confidence that everyone is acting with shared purpose and accountability. Trust is the condition. Transparency is the practice that sustains it in daily operations. The foundations of trust can be broken down into four interlocking dimensions: credibility, reliability, intimacy, and low self-orientation. Credibility is what you know, the knowledge and expertise you bring to the table. Reliability is what you do, the degree to which you follow through on commitments. Intimacy refers to how safe it feels to share openly with you, whether you invite candor or provoke caution. Low self-orientation reflects whose interests you serve, whether you prioritize the team and shared goals over personal agendas. Each of these dimensions matters, and neglecting any one of them weakens trust. For example, a technically brilliant colleague who frequently misses deadlines undermines reliability, while someone highly reliable but self-serving erodes confidence in motives. Strong teams recognize that trust is multifaceted and that it must be cultivated holistically. Leaders and peers alike contribute by demonstrating these qualities consistently, building a resilient culture of trust. Transparency operates through principles that commit teams to timely, truthful sharing of information. This includes openly communicating about status, risks, and reasoning, even when the news is unwelcome. Such openness reduces the fertile ground where speculation and office politics thrive. For instance, a team that regularly shares sprint progress and risk updates prevents rumors about delays from spreading, because the truth is already visible. Transparency also enhances accountability, since decisions and outcomes are seen rather than hidden. Importantly, it must be practiced with respect, avoiding bluntness that damages relationships. When balanced thoughtfully, transparency creates an atmosphere where alignment comes from shared evidence, rather than persuasion or gossip. Over time, these principles become cultural habits that reduce friction, accelerate collaboration, and allow teams to make decisions based on facts rather than conjecture. Transparency is thus the daily discipline that makes trust durable and actionable. Reliability is reinforced through realistic commitments and visible accountability. Teams strengthen trust when they promise only what they can deliver, track progress openly, and renegotiate quickly when conditions change. Reliability does not mean never missing a commitment. It means treating commitments with seriousness and honesty. For example, if a deadline becomes unrealistic due to new findings, informing stakeholders early and renegotiating demonstrates responsibility rather than weakness. Tools like visible boards or burn-down charts make progress transparent, allowing everyone to see whether the team is on track. Swift renegotiation prevents surprises and shows respect for others. Planning. Over time, this reliability builds confidence, because stakeholders and peers know that when this team makes a promise, it will either be kept or responsibly revised. The essence of reliability is consistency paired with honesty, creating the foundation of trust in collaborative environments. Competence signaling ensures that teams maintain confidence in each other's abilities without pretending to know everything. Honest acknowledgement of skill boundaries prevents hidden gaps that can later erode trust. For instance, a developer admitting limited expertise in security but pairing with an expert to learn signals both humility and commitment to growth. Conversely, pretending to possess competence and being exposed later undermines credibility. Signaling competence is not just about displaying strengths, but about being transparent in areas of growth. Pairing and mentoring structures allow individuals to build skills safely while maintaining team confidence. Over time, clear communication about competence reinforces reliability, because colleagues know they can trust both your strengths and your honesty about limits. This honesty transforms skill gaps from risks into opportunities for learning, strengthening trust rather than weakening it. Psychological safety and trust are inseparable. Teams where mistakes are punished or bad news is met with anger inevitably develop secrecy and avoidance. By contrast, when leaders and peers respond to errors with curiosity and problem-solving, trust deepens. People share signals earlier, reducing the cost of surprises and preventing issues from festering. For example, a tester who feels safe admitting they missed a defect allows the team to address it immediately rather than hiding it until it becomes a crisis. Safety creates the conditions for transparency to flourish, and transparency in turn reinforces safety. Together they form a virtuous cycle. Candor begets early action builds reliability, and reliability strengthens trust. Leaders bear particular responsibility for modeling non-punitive responses, showing that truth-telling is more valuable than image protection. This linkage is what allows agile teams to maintain resilience even under intense pressure. Objective language is a practical technique that makes tough conversations safer and more productive. By focusing on observable facts and impacts rather than blame or interpretation, teams reduce defensiveness and preserve relationships. For example, instead of saying, "You always deliver late," a teammate might say, "The last 2 deliverables were 2 days after the deadline, which delayed testing." The first statement provokes defensiveness, while the second invites problem-solving. Objective language creates space for dialogue without accusations, turning disagreements into collaborative exploration. It also protects psychological safety by showing that critique is about work, not personal attack. Over time, objective framing becomes a habit that lowers the emotional cost of difficult conversations. Trust thrives when people know that discussions will be grounded in evidence and respect rather than assumptions or hostility. Objective language thus becomes a linguistic guardrail for maintaining constructive transparency. Decision logs provide another mechanism for strengthening trust. By recording context, options, rationale, and outcomes, they create an auditable trail of choices. This transparency reduces memory battles where disagreements about what was decided undermine alignment. For example, a log entry might note that a certain design was chosen after evaluating 3 options and considering specific risks. Weeks later, when challenges arise, the team can revisit the decision with clarity rather than dispute. Decision logs also protect against hidden decision-making, which breeds suspicion and mistrust. Making rationale visible reassures stakeholders that choices are evidence-based, even if outcomes are imperfect. Logs do not need to be exhaustive. Even lightweight records provide shared memory and accountability. By institutionalizing transparency around decision-making, teams build credibility and reduce the friction that comes from uncertainty or forgotten context. Information radiators transform transparency into shared evidence. Boards, metrics, dashboards, and decision records provide single sources of truth that everyone can access. This reduces reliance on side channels or whispered updates, which often create misalignment. For example, a visible Kanban board ensures that work status is clear to all, preventing disputes about priorities. Metrics dashboards allow stakeholders to see progress directly rather than through filtered reports. Decision records clarify why certain trade-offs were made. Radiators reduce the need for constant explanation, freeing teams to focus on delivery. They also build confidence that information is not being selectively shared or manipulated. By making the state of work continuously visible, radiators align everyone around facts rather than interpretations. This openness accelerates decision-making and strengthens trust, because people know they are seeing the same reality rather than competing narratives. Confidentiality boundaries are essential for maintaining trust alongside transparency. Not everything can or should be shared, particularly when it involves personal data, security-sensitive details, or privileged information. Teams build trust by clarifying these boundaries and respecting them consistently. For example, while a defect in a product may be openly discussed, the personal details of the user who reported it must remain private. Similarly, transparency about risks should not compromise security by exposing sensitive configurations. Boundaries ensure that candor does not cross into negligence. By defining what remains confidential and why, leaders demonstrate responsibility, reinforcing that transparency is intentional rather than careless. Trust grows when people see that honesty coexists with duty of care, ensuring that openness does not put individuals or the organization at risk. Properly handled, confidentiality and transparency are not opposites but complementary elements of ethical trust building. Feedback norms help embed trust into daily operations. By establishing cadence, channels, and expectations for giving and receiving feedback, teams make critique routine rather than exceptional. For example, a team may hold regular feedback sessions or incorporate quick feedback rounds into retrospectives. Norms ensure that input is specific, respectful, and constructive, preventing it from becoming sporadic or emotionally charged. When feedback is normalized, people feel safe to raise concerns and confident they will be heard. Trust grows because issues are surfaced early and resolved before they escalate. Leaders reinforce these norms by modeling openness, asking for feedback themselves, and acting on it visibly. Over time, consistent feedback habits become part of the team's culture, reinforcing accountability and continuous improvement. Trust is not just spoken into existence, it is practiced through the rhythms of transparent, respectful feedback exchange. Channel consistency prevents mixed signals that erode confidence. When messages in meetings, chats, and documents contradict each other, teams experience confusion and mistrust. For example, if a project plan says one thing, but leadership communicates another in casual conversation, people are left questioning which source is true. Consistency across channels reassures everyone that communication is aligned and reliable. This requires discipline in updating artifacts promptly and ensuring that informal discussions do not undermine formal agreements. Leaders play a critical role in modeling this consistency, reinforcing that the official record is the source of truth. By maintaining coherence across communication modes, teams prevent unnecessary friction and suspicion. Channel consistency does not require perfection but vigilance. It is about ensuring that clarity outweighs noise. When consistency is maintained, trust grows because people know they can rely on shared sources without fear of contradiction. Trust repair practices are vital for resilience, because even strong teams occasionally miss expectations or cause harm. Repair begins with acknowledgement, where the responsible party openly names the issue. Impact statements clarify who was affected and how, showing empathy rather than defensiveness. Finally, concrete commitments outline what will be done to prevent recurrence. For example, if a team misses a release deadline, acknowledging it, explaining the impact on stakeholders, and committing to new planning safeguards demonstrates integrity. Trust is not destroyed by failure but by denial or avoidance. Repair practices show that accountability is real and that relationships matter enough to be restored. This process transforms setbacks into opportunities for strengthening bonds because people see that honesty and responsibility prevail even under strain. Effective repair sustains trust as a living, resilient force that can weather the inevitable imperfections of human collaboration. Gossip and triangulation undermine trust by routing concerns through side conversations rather than addressing them directly. Teams committed to transparency discourage these behaviors and redirect issues to the appropriate forum. For example, if a team member complains about another's performance in private, leaders and peers encourage raising the concern respectfully in a retrospective or one-on-one. This reinforces that problems are solved through open, constructive exchange rather than whispered narratives. Gossip corrodes intimacy and creates suspicion, while triangulation traps leaders in middleman roles that weaken accountability. By actively addressing these anti-patterns, teams protect relationships and maintain a culture of candor. Over time, this builds confidence that concerns will be heard fairly and resolved responsibly, without hidden agendas. Eliminating gossip and triangulation is not about silencing dissent, but about ensuring it flows to the right place, preserving both trust and dignity. Inclusion practices ensure that trust extends across roles, seniority levels, and backgrounds. Without deliberate effort, certain voices may be overlooked, creating hidden trust gaps tied to power dynamics or proximity. Inclusive leaders create forums where every perspective is welcomed and considered, whether through structured turn-taking in meetings, anonymous input channels, or explicit invitations to quieter members. For example, rotating facilitation duties can prevent dominance by senior voices and give all members a sense of ownership. Inclusion also requires cultural sensitivity, recognizing that communication styles vary and adapting accordingly. By making inclusion visible, teams signal that trust is not conditional on status, but is a universal expectation. Over time, inclusive practices create equity, strengthening cohesion and collaboration. Trust thrives when all participants feel heard, respected, and valued, regardless of their position or background. Inclusion ensures that transparency benefits everyone, not just the most vocal or powerful. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Remote trust building requires deliberate practices because distance can easily be mistaken for secrecy or neglect. In virtual environments, casual transparency like overhearing conversations or seeing progress in person disappears. Leaders and teams compensate with written context, clear response agreements, and asynchronous updates. For example, a distributed team might document decisions in a shared tool so no one is left guessing, while also agreeing on response times for urgent and non-urgent requests. Asynchronous transparency allows people in different time zones to stay informed without constant real-time alignment. These habits prevent feelings of isolation and suspicion, replacing them with visible accountability. Remote trust is not automatic, but with intentional transparency, it can be as strong or even stronger than in co-located teams. Teams that master these practices create reliability across distance, demonstrating that trust depends on behavior and communication, not physical proximity. Onboarding for trust introduces newcomers to norms, artifacts, and decision histories early. Without this, new team members often guess at unwritten rules, risking missteps that erode confidence. Effective onboarding explains not only what tools are used, but how trust and transparency are practiced. For example, sharing decision logs helps new arrivals understand the rationale behind current practices, while walking through retrospectives shows how feedback is exchanged respectfully. Explicitly teaching norms like raising blockers promptly or using objective language helps newcomers integrate smoothly. This reduces the anxiety of uncertainty and signals that candor is expected and safe. Early exposure to trust practices accelerates belonging and participation, preventing the exclusion that can fracture teams. By designing onboarding around transparency, organizations set the stage for lasting trust, ensuring that every member, regardless of tenure, operates with the same understanding and confidence. Cross-team trust is just as vital as trust within a single team, especially when work spans multiple groups. Suspicion often arises during handoffs when one team depends on another for timely, high-quality outputs. Leaders can mitigate this by establishing interface agreements, hosting shared demos, and prioritizing early integration. For example, two teams integrating software modules might conduct joint reviews at regular intervals to confirm compatibility. Transparency in progress and risks prevents one group from feeling left in the dark about another's work. Shared demos build confidence by allowing everyone to see tangible progress, not just promises. Early integration ensures that issues are surfaced before they grow into crises, reinforcing reliability across boundaries. Cross-team trust transforms collaboration from reluctant dependency into shared ownership, aligning groups toward collective outcomes. When teams practice transparency together, silos dissolve, and the broader system operates with confidence and cohesion. Incident communication protocols preserve trust during stressful moments when confidence is most vulnerable. Delays, outages, or unexpected failures test relationships because emotions run high and stakes feel urgent. Effective protocols specify that updates must be timely, factual, and clear about next steps. For instance, during a service outage, providing frequent status updates and outlining mitigation steps keeps stakeholders informed and reassured. Even if the problem persists, transparency reduces speculation and panic by showing that the situation is being managed. Overpromising or hiding details, by contrast, amplifies mistrust and damages credibility. Protocols ensure consistency, so teams do not need to invent communication approaches under duress. They also demonstrate respect for stakeholders by treating their need for information as a priority. In times of crisis, incident communication is not just operational, it is relational, protecting trust through clarity and candor. Service-level objectives and clear ownership make reliability tangible. Trust grows when expectations about responsiveness and quality are explicit rather than assumed. For example, defining that support tickets will be acknowledged within a certain time frame provides stakeholders with confidence in the system's reliability. Ownership clarifies who is responsible for meeting these commitments, eliminating ambiguity that erodes confidence. When objectives are met consistently, trust deepens. When they are missed, accountability mechanisms, such as trust repair practices, demonstrate integrity. Service-level objectives also allow for honest negotiation when capacity is constrained, preventing overcommitment. By turning reliability into measurable agreements, teams build predictability into their relationships. This reduces misunderstandings and strengthens confidence that promises will be kept. Trust thrives not on vague assurances but on clear, lived agreements about what can be expected and who ensures delivery. Risk transparency is another essential practice. Teams that openly surface assumptions, leading indicators, and mitigation status invite collaboration before problems escalate. For example, acknowledging that a new feature depends on untested infrastructure signals uncertainty early, allowing for joint problem-solving. Hiding such risks creates surprise failures that undermine confidence. By contrast, sharing risks openly, even those that reflect poorly on current readiness, demonstrates responsibility and honesty. Risk transparency reframes uncertainty as a collective challenge rather than a private liability. It also allows leaders and stakeholders to align resources where they are most needed, reducing the likelihood of missed expectations. Over time, this openness builds credibility, as others see that the team consistently calls out potential issues before they become crises. Transparency about risk is not a weakness, but a strength that anchors trust in proactive, responsible behavior. Trust measurement helps detect erosion before it becomes cultural damage. Lightweight pulses and behavioral indicators provide early warning signs. For instance, frequent missed acceptance criteria, aging backlog items, or excessive rework may indicate that reliability is slipping. Pulse surveys asking whether team members feel safe raising issues can reveal cracks in psychological safety. Leaders who treat these measures seriously can act before problems calcify. Trust is fragile, and without attention, small lapses compound into cynicism or disengagement. Measurement makes trust tangible, reminding teams that it is not simply a feeling, but a set of observable behaviors and experiences. By checking trust regularly, teams show that it matters as much as velocity or quality. This vigilance prevents complacency and ensures that trust remains a managed, renewable resource rather than an unspoken assumption vulnerable to neglect. Vendor and partner trust extends the same norms across organizational boundaries. External collaborators often operate under different pressures, and mismatches in transparency can cause friction. Building shared artifacts, conducting evidentiary reviews, and establishing escalation paths create confidence across these relationships. For example, providing partners with access to relevant dashboards ensures that they see progress as clearly as internal teams. Joint reviews reinforce accountability, while defined escalation paths prevent issues from festering in silence. Extending trust norms to vendors signals respect and builds stronger partnerships, reducing adversarial dynamics. It also ensures that surprises are minimized, since transparency keeps expectations aligned. Over time, this consistency fosters reliability and strengthens collaboration across boundaries. Vendor and partner trust demonstrates that transparency is not just an internal practice but a system-wide approach to building durable, cooperative relationships. Audit and compliance-aware transparency proves that integrity and accountability can coexist with agility. Embedding evidence collection into normal tools and workflows prevents last-minute scrambles or performative documentation marathons. For example, linking backlog items to compliance requirements or automatically logging approvals makes transparency seamless. This provides confidence to auditors and stakeholders that decisions and actions are traceable. It also reassures teams that transparency does not mean endless paperwork, but is simply part of responsible operations. Audit-aware practices build external trust by showing that the team is disciplined and accountable, even as it adapts quickly. They prevent the erosion of credibility that comes from chaotic or inconsistent records. By aligning compliance with daily transparency, organizations demonstrate that agility is compatible with oversight, reinforcing trust at both the team and institutional level. Security and privacy alignment balances transparency with protection of sensitive information. Teams achieve this by pairing least privilege access with open process visibility. For example, while not everyone may see raw personal data, everyone can understand the process by which privacy is protected. This ensures candor without exposing vulnerabilities. By being explicit about what information is restricted and why, teams prevent suspicion that transparency is selective or manipulative. Security practices such as access controls and audit logs complement transparency, providing confidence that openness does not compromise duty of care. This alignment reassures users, stakeholders, and auditors alike that integrity is preserved while honesty is practiced. It demonstrates that transparency is about accountability, not recklessness, and that trust thrives when candor and responsibility operate hand in hand. Anti-patterns must be named and confronted before they calcify into culture. Practices such as status theater, sandbagging, hiding blockers, or spinning narratives corrode trust by replacing candor with performance. Status theater occurs when reports are polished for appearance rather than accuracy. Sandbagging inflates estimates to make delivery seem easier. Hiding blockers delays resolution, while narrative spinning manipulates perception rather than sharing truth. Teams committed to transparency explicitly reject these patterns, calling them out when observed. Leaders reinforce this by rewarding honesty over appearances, even when the truth is inconvenient. By surfacing and addressing anti-patterns, teams prevent decay into cynicism or politics. This vigilance keeps trust healthy, ensuring that transparency remains authentic rather than performative. Anti-pattern confrontation is not about blame, but about protecting cultural integrity, so that transparency continues to build rather than erode lasting confidence. Leadership modeling cements trust norms. When leaders themselves practice candor, humility, and consistency, they show that truth-telling is rewarded rather than punished. For instance, a leader who admits to a poor decision and outlines corrective actions signals that honesty is valued over image. When leaders consistently align words with actions, reliability is reinforced. Modeling humility by asking for feedback and acting on it demonstrates that transparency applies to everyone, not just the team. Over time, leadership modeling sets the cultural baseline. If leaders can be trusted to be candid and accountable, others will follow. Conversely, if leaders spin narratives or conceal problems, the team quickly mirrors those behaviors. Leadership's example becomes the strongest signal about whether transparency is safe. Modeling candor and consistency is therefore one of the most powerful levers leaders have for building lasting team trust. Rituals that sustain trust keep transparency alive through practice. Regular demos, decision reviews, and blameless post-incident debriefs embed candor into the team's rhythm. For example, demos make progress and obstacles visible, while decision reviews ensure that rationale is shared openly. Blameless post-incident reviews reinforce psychological safety by focusing on systemic improvements rather than personal blame. These rituals normalize transparency so it becomes routine rather than exceptional. They also provide repeated opportunities to strengthen trust, ensuring it is not left to chance. Over time, rituals create a cultural heartbeat of openness and accountability, signaling that candor is expected and safe. Rituals are not just meetings, they are trust-building devices that keep values visible. By embedding them consistently, teams turn transparency into habit, and habit into culture, ensuring that trust remains durable through changing conditions. The evidence of success in building trust is visible in outcomes. Teams with high trust make faster decisions because they are not bogged down by suspicion or politics. Flow becomes steadier because blockers are surfaced early and addressed quickly. Surprises diminish as risks and problems are raised promptly, preventing costly escalations. Stakeholder confidence rises as communication is transparent and reliable. For example, a team trusted by sponsors can negotiate changes openly without fear of backlash, maintaining alignment even under pressure. These benefits validate the investment in transparency and trust practices, showing that they are not soft extras, but essential enablers of performance. In the end, trust is not just about relationships, it is about delivery. Teams that sustain trust through transparency achieve both healthier collaboration and more dependable outcomes, proving that candor is the engine of both culture and results. Team trust synthesis emphasizes transparent, truth-telling, realistic commitments, respectful feedback, and consistent behavior as the everyday practices that make trust durable. Reliability and competence are made visible through transparency, psychological safety ensures candor, and leadership modeling reinforces norms. Rituals and repair practices keep trust resilient, while vigilance against anti-patterns prevents decay. Trust is not built in slogans but in the daily discipline of communication and accountability. When teams commit to honesty, openness, and respect, they build confidence that endures under pressure. This confidence accelerates decision-making, steadies flow, and strengthens stakeholder relationships, making trust a practical enabler of dependable delivery. In agile contexts, trust is both the foundation and the outcome of effective teamwork, and transparency is the craft that keeps it alive. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.